Hello and welcome to another video from salesberg.com.
In this video we shall be looking at Thermaltake Chaser A31 desktop case. Quick word about the Chaser name. It comes from the Thermaltake Chaser MK1 case we looked at earlier, and that was a great case. Let's see what the connections are between the MK1 with the A31. So let's begin the review starting with the packaging. Very well printed box, the usual Thermaltake theme, and the inside was protected with styrofoam packaging. Nothing out of the ordinary, but just sufficient. Now that the case is out of the box, let's have a quick look at the external appearance. Well, the height is approximately 500 millimeters. The width is approximately 210 millimeters, and the length is just about 490 millimeters. The external surface is predominantly black. However, a blue and a white variation is also available. The overall design looks rather simplistic, which in my books is pretty good, and it should appeal to a wider group of people as well. The front panel has 12 5¼ bay covers. However, only 3 5¼ bay drives can be installed. The remaining 9 covers can be removed in some ways, but it does not serve much purpose. So let's see why that is. And to understand that, we have to remove the front panel, which is done by holding from the top and the bottom and pull from the bottom. The panel comes off, behind which we can see the position for the 3 5¼ inch bays. Below that is where a 120mm fan goes, but we cannot put any drive or anything of that nature there. Behind the front panel, the differences continue. The top 3 covers can be removed, but the bottom ones aren't exactly the same and cannot be removed in same fashion. To remove the top covers, all we have to do is pull the arrow locks on opposite directions and the cover comes off. All of the covers are filtered, which should keep the dust away, as we use front of the case for air intake. By default, the fan will be taking air in, and we can add another 120mm fan to assist that further. Now with the remaining bottom covers, they can be removed, but nothing standard will fit through it, but still handy for washing and so forth. So let's look at the front of the case just behind the panel. The 120mm fan is already installed. On top of that, another 120mm fan can be installed, and going further up, there is the space for the 3 5¼ inch drive bays. Above that is the board for the I/O and so forth, which is a bit too exposed for my liking. With the front panel installed, that is quickly taken care of. The I/Os are down to the basic, with 2 USB 3 port, headphone, mic, a reset button, a HDD activity LED, power switch with the power LED behind it. The top panel consists of a large area with mesh grill on it, and this is also filtered. Just in front of that is a tray area where one can put various things for storage, and I quite like it. I mean, look at it, I'm already using it. Jokes apart, we cannot go wrong with space for storage. To remove the top panel, you need to hold from one end and pull, it'll pop right off. The top panel cannot be used to lift the case, so when moving the case we need to be very careful not to hold it there. While the top panel is filtered, this filter cannot be removed. Now the good thing about this top panel is that there is quite a lot of room underneath it, enough to house 240mm fans. We shall see the details shortly. Now the back of the case. Everything is very much standard. They include thumb screws to open the side panels. There's a 120mm fan already installed, 2 rubber grommet pass-throughs for liquid cooling tubes. There are 7 expansion slots. These are vented as well. And at the bottom is where the power supply goes. Now just below that, we can see there's a little bit of the filter sticking out. Now if we hold it and pull it, the filter comes out. We shall see the filter shortly as well. Now let's look at the bottom of the case. The 4 legs have little patches of foam stuck to it, Now this should prevent the surface from getting scratched. Also, it should reduce some vibration as well. The legs themselves are about 1 inch tall, which should facilitate airflow from the bottom of the case. The filter sits at the bottom quite firmly, and it covers the entire intake area, including the power supply's fan area and the additional 120mm fan area. The left side panel is beveled outwards. Now this should come in handy for cable management, although how much we shall see. The right side panel came with scratch protective film on it. Once removed, it is quite clear and allows good visibility into the case. Inside of the case, it's all black as well. At the top right corner, we can see the 3 positions for the 5¼ inch drive bays. These are tool-free, and below that are the 2 cages that hold 3 trays each. Now each tray holds either 1 hard drive or 1 SSD. The middle cage is held secured with 2 thumb screws. Once these screws are removed, the cage will slide out, and that will make room for a larger graphics card. There is included some warranty information, a user's manual, a drive bay converter kit, and for that also there is a cover that goes on a 5¼ inch drive bay to convert to 3½ inch drive. There's also a bag full of screws, buzzer, and some cable ties. Now the motherboard tray comes with a lot of motherboard standoffs already installed. There is also rubber grommets for the cable pass-through cutouts. At the top of the case there is some clearance between the top of the case and where the motherboard starts, and technically a 280mm radiator can fit, however it needs to be slim.
Okay, the motherboard tray, or the reverse side of it, very important for cable management. So speaking of which, I'll start off with the little cutout over here on the top right corner. Generally motherboards tend to have their 8-pin EPS connector right up there, so this should come in handy. We shall see how that works out. And obviously staring at us is this huge cutout for the CPU's retention plate to be installed. And next thing to mention would be the cable tie points. There's plenty in the middle over here, some vertically, some horizontally, over here in the corner as well. However, none on the other side. And that I have problem with, because if we had cable tie points over here, we could route some unused cables and tie them over here and utilize the space and so forth. But unfortunately, there's nothing there, so only cable tie points end up over here. Now, that means all this area is just going to be unused pretty much, and they will end up in a bunch in the center. Furthermore, there is another thing, is that this metal column running right through the center, and that reduces the space quite a lot. If you see, there isn't much gap between the chassis and the column over here. So how that allows or prevents the cable from going from one side to the other, we shall see when we install the entire system. And lastly, as we can see, there are nicely grommeted cutouts over here. There's 3 of them in total. That's always handy.
Now the top of the case. There can be installed 2 120mm fans or 140mm fans, but no bigger than that. I placed a 200mm Thunderbolt fan on top, and it's just too wide for the chassis. Installation of the top fans requires us to use a custom long screw. Now, problem with custom screws are that if it is lost, we cannot replace them, or finding a replacement is harder. However, once installed, the fans were held in quite securely. The accessories pack also included some rubber washers which could be used to reduce vibration from these fans.
Okay, installing the optical drive. Now the first thing I need to mention is that removing these front covers we have to pull out the front panel because these covers, they open inwards. Like to open it, they'd go inside, not outside. So we have to open this front panel in order to get that done. Now remaining is just that we slide it in, pulling the lock. There we go. And it catches in place like so. Little bit fiddly, needs a little bit of wiggling and so forth, but once it's in place, it's actually quite secured. In fact, it's one of the better ones that I've come across recently. It's very secured, it's not going anywhere. Let us quickly look at the hard drive cage, which I've removed. The hard drive cage is actually quite nice. The tray locks into place. We have to press on either sides to pull the tray out, and the tray itself has vibration dampening foam pre-installed, so all you have to do is place your hard drive. You have to bend it a little bit to get the hard drive to fit, and then once it's in position, simply there we go, slide the tray in like so. And these days removable trays have been made very plasticky and very flimsy and so forth. This is actually quite nice, and the construction is fairly good.
While building the system, I came across a few things that I need to mention. If the power supply is any longer than 160 millimeters, the bottom fan cannot be installed. There's just no room left for it. And if the graphics card is any longer than 29 centimeters, then the middle cage has to be removed, which was the case over here. I used a Asus GTX 680 DirectCU 2 Top Edition, which required the middle cage to be removed. Now the cable management side of things. The EPS connection did pass through, as I mentioned earlier, quite nicely. However, there were many bunches at the other side of the case and at the center, as I mentioned earlier as well. The 24-pin cable requires a certain amount of turning radius, and it seemed that that was not accounted for. Hence, closing the side panel was a bit of a struggle. With effort, the panel does close. A 120mm fan was installed at the bottom of the case, and the cable coming out of the power supplies were routed from the back of the motherboard tray, and in the end everything worked out quite nicely. As far as the case goes, we've already made a reasonable gaming system out of it. There is a reasonable graphics card with reasonable CPU with reasonable CPU cooler, and on and on and on. What I'm trying to understand is, why does this case belong in the Chaser series? For example, in the Chaser MK1, the 5¼ inch drive bay cover just comes out so easily. And then there's the retractable headphone hanger, or a fan controller perhaps. After all, this case can house up to 6 fans. I couldn't figure that one out. The A31 is a decent case, but I just don't see the connection with the Chaser. Like any other case, this case will face pretty strong competition at the market. The expected price is about $100 to $120, and at that price there is a lot of competition out there. I didn't see many new ideas with this case either. Most of the features that this case has had been done before. Now that is not to say that this case is not competent, it absolutely is, and I've already demonstrated that you can build a quite decent gaming system with it. Some care needs to be taken when choosing the components. For example, the length of the power supply should be about 16 centimeters or less, otherwise you cannot install the bottom fan. Likewise, the graphics card needs to be less than 29 centimeters as well, otherwise you'll have to take one of the cage out. Even with one cage out, you'll be able to use 4 hard drives or 5 SSDs, which would be plenty for a system in this category. If someone needed more room, perhaps the Chaser MK1 was the right choice, or maybe even something larger. Calling the A31 Chaser may work for marketing, but the case on its own has enough to offer. Enough to make it a very worthy contender.
Thank you for watching the video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Your comments and suggestions are most welcome. Please subscribe in order to stay updated with our latest videos. Bye for now.